Fiona, Tom Hitchcock here. How are you?
I am well, Tom. How are you?
I can't complain. Can't complain. Yeah, no, life's good. Busy, lots of things happening. Can't complain. We don't really know each other, really, to be honest with you. So, I don't know where this conversation is going to go, but maybe just kick us off. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we don't really know each other all that well, but I think I've followed you for some time on LinkedIn and always been interested in your podcast. So, as you know, I felt kind of nervous being invited onto the show, and I think it took me a while to finally work up the pluck to email you back and say, "Okay, I'll come on board." But you promised me that you'd be gentle. So, no tricky
We're
curveball
recording now, so I
questions.
can't back out of that. So, yeah, it's just a
Yeah.
conversation anyway, isn't it? So you'll be fine,
Yeah, look,
I'm sure.
people often do ask me about my career path, and I often feel like sometimes it's careering out of, or has careered out of control. I think the way I describe it is more like an elegant zigzag than a path, than a straight line path as such. You know, I actually started working life as an art curator. I graduated with a degree in architecture and
Okay.
also a degree in arts with a major in fine arts and French. So like everyone who graduates with, those degrees, I just thought I'd, probably move to Paris, get a job at the Louvre, and that would be my life. But it didn't work out that way. And as I say, I've had this sort of elegant zigzag through different sectors and different kind of pathways in my working life.
Okay, I do like that term, the elegant zigzag. I think I've probably been on that same one. I reckon there's a bit of spiral in there as well, just for extra measure. Probably resembled by your picture behind you. It seems to be a bit of the pattern of the career. Is that something you made yourself or purchased or?
No, it's not. It's by an amazing Indigenous artist called Betty Churchill.
Okay, yeah, nice, nice. And you got the color code to go with it as well.
I know, I didn't realize how color coded I was, but hey, I'm in the right spot for color coding, with Mr. Purple. So, yeah,
Yeah,
you're always on brand.
yes, we try our best too. So there's purple bits all over the place here. To be honest with you, if it's purple, I've acquired it and taken it off the market. So you started off your career as an architect, or you trained to be the architect?
I trained to be an architect. I mean, seriously, who studies for 5 years without a genuine intention to
Yeah.
work in that profession? But look, I was deeply, and I still am deeply interested in the arts, culture, the built environment, and design. And I think design really is all around us. It's in your studio, it's in your clothes, it's in everything we do. But I think those degrees really helped shape my curiosity. And I often say that architecture helps you think in 3 dimensions. And so, for instance, if you think about service delivery, you might think about vertical integration, horizontal integration, but there's a kind of a third dimension, which is kind of the demographics that you're working with, whether that's an age dimension, whether that's a social, cultural dimension. So, when you are holding a few different thoughts in mind, I think training formally to think in 3D. I know that might sound a bit odd, but training formally to think and execute in 3D is really helpful in business life.
That's an interesting point because obviously, if we look at how we think and our subconscious and all the schools of force and self sabotage and methodologies like design thinking, we know we think in images. We don't visualize the filler words and what have you. But it's an interesting point to think in 3D because you'd assume we do, you know. But what you're saying is there is a difference. There's something that needs to be acknowledged. There's a different way of approaching things with your thought process.
Yeah, I'm saying that, yeah, there is a formal training or a formal learning or a structured learning. Some people are innately 3D thinkers. And, as kids, we play with Lego or Meccano or build sandcastles at the beach. And that's all 3D modeling, isn't it? And Play Doh. But then as we work through our kind of academic lives, it becomes more kind of linear. You have to have a kind of a beginning, a middle, and an end if you want to have a convincing argument and so on. And that isn't always the way we see work play out in our working lives as well. It's not always linear. In fact, it very rarely is. these pathways from kind of, being the most junior person in the organization to being the CEO. They're not so linear these days. It's not just a kind of a step rung by rung up a straight ladder. So I think, yeah, there is some benefit in that. And as you were saying, you know, design thinking, people centered design, human centered design, all these kind of frameworks are kind of part of that sort of non-linear planning, non-linear thinking, and they have some structure to it that enables different perspectives and different outcomes from that planning.
Have you heard of a term called black box thinking before?
No, tell me more.
So yeah, I could talk about it for quite some time because it's a workshop that we run, but again, that's non-linear and it looks. It's essentially pre-mortem thinking, so it's factoring the worst case scenario and working backwards from that and having cadences in place
Uh,
to have those in place. So if you was to go to the bank manager for a business loan, for example, traditionally we show this little graph, it goes gradually up, what have you, which is never achieved. It never goes like that. It's not realistic. It's an optimistic textbook graph, when in reality, a war in Iran kicks off, COVID happens, we have some personal problems and we don't feel it. A recession kicks in. We have man flu for a month. All these things factor in, and it changes where we plan to go. It makes it non-linear, as you say. And but if we build this into what the future looks like and flesh out all the different scenarios and how we would accommodate those scenarios, and then it's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of planning.
mm.
Sort of bulletproofs you somewhat.
Yeah, yeah, and I could see how that would really. I have heard of that. I just didn't sort of catch it in the moment, but I can really see how that would frame up conversations differently and force different perspectives, which is kind of sometimes what you need, isn't it? Those kind of catalytic sort of conversations.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. So, okay, so we studied to be an architect. Okay, actually, I'm going to tell you an interesting fact. But just I'm going to touch this. I'll be interested to see what your thoughts are on this. So, I'm quite dyslexic. When I was in my second year university in Bath in England, I was told I was dyslexic, and he did this test. It had 70 different components. From one memory, it's called the Warhol test, and each of these components, it had lateral thinking, spatial awareness, IQ, whatever. Okay. And you get, very bad or very good. You get this little graph that comes out. Okay. Now they found that me to be dyslexic, which is fine. It wasn't particularly anything new to me. Okay. But the lady there, an American lady, she got super excited because in one of my components of it, it was in the superior range. It was very high. And she told me at the time, I remember very clearly, it's not me blowing my own trumpet. She goes, it's the highest she's seen of it. And she's done it for 20 years. Da, 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 da. So, okay, right. So I was kind of uncomfortable how excited she was. But what she told me to do, she goes, I never do this, but I'm going to go out on a limb here. You need to stop your degree and change your degree. You should be an architect. Okay.
Really?
So basically, yeah, she said that. Obviously, I never took that advice because obviously a couple of years into a degree and what have you. And I did research it though. And at the time in the UK, it was 7 years in the UK to be a registered architect. But you had to be very good at maths, and that was not a forte. And even that was low on my thing as well. So it was off the cards. But what's your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a facet of the sort of creative thinking, the 3D thinking, having that sort of dyslexic skill set?
I I think so. I think anything that helps us think differently, whether that's innate to us, whether that's dyslexia or a form of neurodiversity or anything, could really, and I think you touched on all the things that make a pathway non-linear. Um, whether it's COVID, whether it's a personal issue, whether you're just not feeling that vibe anymore. You had this brilliant business plan, brilliant strategic plan, but you get halfway through it and you've just lost your mojo or whatever else, want to go and, work with a laptop or not work on an island somewhere. But whatever that is, I think, having different kind of approaches, different tools in your toolkit. And I think the more that one can know about oneself, um, the the more you can try to manage yourself through these processes as well. And I think that's having those without being sort of spending all your time kind of navel gazing, but the more you can understand about yourself and what makes you tick, and what really gets you annoyed as well, can kind of help you sort of navigate all these different challenges and changes.
Yeah, okay. I agree with all that. That's an interesting take, and it's not something I share particularly often. You give me the context, and I thought, shall I mention it or shall I not? No, I'm going to. I think there'd be value to it. So, okay, all right. So we never became an architect. What happened?
Well, yeah. So I really had wanted to be actually, truthfully, I wanted to be a doctor, but I've
Okay.
always been really, really queasy about blood. I'm still the person who faints in just having
Yep.
one vial of blood taken. Somebody, nicks themselves, and I'm just I, I'm not even the one who's able to run to the bathroom to get a band aid. But, so it did occur to me when I was about sort of 16 or so and formulating what I would do at uni, and realized I think medicine really wasn't for me. And I know it sounds like such a jump from medicine to architecture and fine arts, but I was equally interested in the arts, studied music, studied French, and was really deeply interested. So decided I wanted to be an art curator of all things.
Okay.
My parents were at me saying, "Look, you should try to get a profession." Um, I will say, of course, being an art curator is, of course, a profession, but I think they wanted me to be a lawyer or a doctor or, in inverted commas, something sensible. So I studied architecture, and with the aim of wanting to be an art curator. I was really, really fortunate when I graduated. Even though I graduated in the time of a recession, I managed to get a job working as an art curator. And I said I'd always imagined that I'd just go overseas, but for personal reasons, I decided to stay in Perth, which is my hometown. So I worked for about a decade in fine arts. And then, oddly enough, by then undertaken an MBA. I'd done a few other things. I'd moved into arts management rather than only being an art curator. And so I was looking at, we were touring exhibitions internationally. I was, considering things like Forex, risk, insurances, a whole lot of the kind of logistics of getting an art exhibition on the road or in the air. And an opportunity came up to work in a bank of all things. So I always say I moved from fine arts to finance, and that was another about a decade of my working life that I worked in investments, insurance, and superannuation. And I loved that sector. I mean, people thought, "Gee, how can you move from the arts
Mm.
into finance?" But it was a really dynamic time. It was a time where banks and financial institutions were really embracing the online world. There was a lot of tension, not inappropriately, from the customer base that kind of wanted to be able to queue up and get cash over the counter from a teller and talk to their favorite teller and so on. So there was a lot of transition. And I started by working in community relations, and then very
Mm.
quickly, within about 6 months, was promoted into looking after the retail banking for the whole of Western Australia, and then that expanded into WA and SA. So that was a really, really interesting period of time for me. And yeah, back to your question, I never practiced architecture, but I'm still deeply, deeply interested in architecture and, as I said, the built environment.
So we haven't touched on architecture yet. There may still something may still happen. You might design
Yes.
your own home or do something. Do some local projects. Now you're famous in Perth. Um, you sort design a new stadium or something for them.
I don't think so, but watch this space. Who knows?
Exactly. And who is Fiona today then? So fast forward, and it were to encapsulate your your journey thus far. What
Yeah.
defines you?
Yeah, so really, now I predominantly work in human services, which is a mix of services, allied health services. Mental health has been an area, professional area that I've worked in for almost 15 years now, and it's a challenging area. You know, when I started working in the mental health space, um, the word the S word, suicide, let alone suicide prevention, wasn't talked about very openly. There was a considerable amount of stigma, particularly for men, in talking openly, or talking at all about emotional well-being, mental health, let alone mental ill health. So we've come a long way as a community in 15 years, and it's one of those, I think, unexpected positive. I know there was a lot of negatives about the global pandemic, but what perhaps one of the positives in Australia, at least, was a more openness or readiness to kind of confront and address and accept that we all have emotions and feelings, and that sometimes those emotions and feelings can not be so healthily regulated, and that might be where we need to seek professional help. So that's been an interesting time. But I also still, as you know, I still kind of work on boards that are in finance and financial services. So I would say the kind of common thread for me has been a sense of curiosity, but a lot of the skills that I have, and most people will find this, their skills are actually transferable
Uh-huh.
across sectors. So it's kind of, you know, if you can find where not only where your passion and your purpose is, but where you can actually perform well, then that's kind of the sweet spot, I think, for most people.
I think so too. And from listening to you, if I was to find a common thread myself, I would say you're familiar with transitioning. It seems that
Yeah,
you were there when the banks were changing their face and how they behave, which that's a significant change because it's a pillar in society. And you're quite right, the local community, especially the older generation, will be more rigid or not wanting to change that and seeing their local branch turn into a local pub instead. You know, and then you got that transition of where you were with the workplace next, and what have you, off the back of COVID and how we perceptions and stigmas and conversations changed as well. So it seems like you're the good person to have when something's going from A to B and not everyone's on the same page. Let's stick
I
Fiona in
think
there,
you're
see if
right.
she can
Thank
use her
you. That's
transferable skills.
Yeah, that's a I never really thought about it like that, but that's an insight that I'm going to take with me from this conversation. Thanks, Tom. Certainly, the corollary of that is I've often said that I am not the person for steady state operations. So when everything's going swimmingly, and what you need is a leader or a manager or anyone to kind of make sure that things are ticking over exactly tomorrow, just exactly as they were yesterday. That's probably not me, but yeah, I probably enjoy leading through transition and change and some of the challenges and opportunities that come with that, and steadying people. I think, you know, work is really about how you get on with people, and you know, some people naturally lean into change, and some people, for whatever reasons, don't feel as comfortable. So if you can help people take each step at a time through that transition, then, you know, that's actually deeply rewarding for me as well.
But if we look at the future then, so obviously, as you know, we sit quite comfortably in the world of work. We've got educated opinions on that matter. And I think if I was to look at the change in the world of work, is there has been a serious disconnect with interpersonal communication. Okay. The working from home is the easy one to pick on. Okay. Yes, we can go digital, we can do what we're doing now, but it's not the same as being able to shake the hand, eyeball, pick up something in your environment, both laugh together, collaborate because you bounce off someone in a corridor as you're passing them. But it's even more than that. There's roles now which are becoming very tech heavy. Okay, to a point of being replaced and what have you, and we lean more into our co-pilot, our second brain, rather than the disc-styled personalities we're surrounded by.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think maybe the world of work is transitioning away from having those interpersonal skills.
absolutely. And but I think those interpersonal skills are beyond critical. And look, I'm no futurist, but my sense is that increasingly the arts, the humanities, the interpersonal skills, emotional intelligence, whatever kind of label we want to give to this is going to be increasingly important in the future of work, because some of the roles that can be automated will be automated. And we've seen that in the past. I mean, we've all not lived through, but culturally we've lived through the Industrial Revolution. We're still living at the moment through the tech revolution, and humanity will make it through the other side, and workplaces will make it through the other side, but they will be forever changed. And I do think one of the constants, or one of the continuums really, is that human interaction, and the way that as people we need to connect. And we're seeing, for instance, a loneliness pandemic epidemic about to kind of hit us as well. And with an aging population, the importance of those interpersonal relationships and those human connections is so critical.
I see it, and I know we've got to wrap up in a minute, but we do some stuff with job fairs and we speak to the kids. We ask what they want to do. Obviously, they do not know what they want to do. Maybe 1 in 10 says, I want to be an architect, I want to be a doctor, lawyer, whatever. But that's normal, so I can't hold that against them because we all know where we're at that stage. But what I did find, and what was concerning, it was the lack of the communication skills to be able, for the common courtesies, to be able to hold a basic conversation with a stranger, to shake a hand properly, to look people in the eye. It was non-existent. It was gone. It wasn't there. And when I was chatting with maybe the teachers in those locations where this happened, they said, "Yeah, we've seen the change, and it's down to screen time."
Yeah. It's really interesting. Yeah, I find it fascinating. And if you do think about the workplace, I often think that, the workplace it's not a meritocracy, it's a marketplace. And if you're not present in the marketplace, and you're not positioning and sort of pitching yourself well in that marketplace, then you are going to probably see yourself more and more sidelined. So, yeah, couldn't agree more that, I mean, here we are arguing against screen time, and we're both sitting talking to each other through a screen. But I couldn't agree with you more that interpersonal skills, but also that you've got to practice a skill. You've got to practice that skill, and that you can't practice that by just talking to a screen. You have to get out, whether that be at school, at uni, and in the workplace. Yeah.
Yep, love it. Okay, well, listen, thank you very much for the conversation. I've enjoyed talking with you. I know we could go on longer, but as we know, life is what it is, and I know I've got a hard finish, so I can't continue anyway. But thank you for your time, Fiona. Um, just two quick questions before we wrap up then. Firstly, how was the podcast for you? 'Cause I know you were nervous and you asked me to be gentle. How do you feel now you've done it?
Oh, it was great. Thank you. You did make it easy. And I loved hearing some of your stories, Tom. It kind of adds to the kind of richness of who you are and what the podcast is all about. So thank you.
Good. Okay, so that's a big tick. And the final one, anybody listening to your story, where you come from, where you're going, and would like to make contact with you, what would be the best route for them to reach out?
I think the easiest, quickest route is via LinkedIn. I'm readily findable on LinkedIn, and people can send me a LinkedIn email.
Okay, fantastic. So when this goes live, specifically on the YouTube channel, put your LinkedIn link in the comments, and then that's there, and I'm sure the right people will reach out at the right time.
Beautiful. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for your time, Fiona.
Have a great day.
Hello again, it is I am Mr. Purple. Thanks again for watching this video. If you like my videos, if you like what we try to do here, please subscribe if you haven't done it already. The other thing that's very popular right now is the t-shirts, the Mr. Purple t-shirts. There's lots of people wearing these at the moment. You can grab yours on our website, copying this link below. So once again, thanks for listening. We love your feedback. Engage with us and speak soon.